In the mid-50s, Britain was still a bit grim. Food was dull, clothes were dull, and the music, well, we just listened to what our parents listened to, which was sometimes dull. And then when I was 10, something extraordinary happened. He was rebellious. He was gorgeous. He was Elvis Presley. He played a kind of rock and roll music that forced you to get up and jive. Films of him dancing showed him swiveling about in a way that nice boys didn't. He had a voice like velvet and long hair. He was young, but he already ruled America. Of course, we didn't know it then, but in the next 2 decades, he'd become the most successful recording artist of all. And then, tragically, it would all be over far too soon. I'm not so interested in the later years, but I'm fascinated by the early ones. My Elvis was this young one, before the jumpsuits and the big lifestyle. But what was he really like? If my dream had come true and he'd come over to England and I had met him, I wonder, would I have liked the boy buried underneath the myth? I'm going in search of the youth catapulted to fame and fortune. How had his upbringing prepared him for it? I want to find out. I want to meet the people who knew him and loved him for what he really was. The thing about being a fan of Elvis is that you just love everything about him. I loved the way he looked, the way he sang, I loved the way he dressed, I loved the photographs of him, the way he performed on stage and in concerts. I loved his films, well, not all of them. And I loved his smile and his sense of humor. I loved the fact that that he never really grinned huge cheesy grins. He had a special Elvis grin, and I borrowed that for Patsy in Absolutely Fabulous. So Patsy had a special Elvis. She just said no. She used to laugh like that because that was cool. That was Elvis. Little tribute to Elvis. I wish I'd met him. I wish I'd known him. I know I would have loved him, and I hope and think he would have loved me. Elvis would have been 80 this year. At London's famous Abbey Road studios, recording home of the Beatles, they're marking the occasion with a new album of his music. His co-producer is someone I've wanted to meet all my life. Once upon a time, every girl I knew wanted to be queen to the king. It should have been me, but Priscilla got there first. Today, she's come all the way from Los Angeles to hear musicians from the string and brass sections at work.
This is going to be fun.
Oh, dear heart. Welcome to Abbey Road Studios.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Elvis performed with large bands at Las Vegas, but his dream was to record with a full orchestra. Would Elvis have liked it?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. This is something you would have dreamed of doing, especially here. This is just, gives me chills, really. Wow, really beautiful, touching. Thank you all, Shirley.
Don, how did you get together over this?
Well, I had the initial idea. I always felt Elvis could make a great album with a symphonic orchestra, particularly with the operatic tone in his voice and choosing songs that would work.
We really collaborated and felt really the same way about the choices. One of my favorite songs on this album is American Trilogy, and I'm proud of it because I was driving down Sunset Boulevard and I heard the song come on the radio, and I had I had chills. I thought, my God, Elvis should be singing this song, as it was everything that Elvis believed in about his country, about living in the South, and about his maker. So I turned around, went back to the house. He put it on, and he listened to it. He loved it, and of course recorded it, and it became a huge hit. Both Don and I loved it and felt that it was certainly worthy to be in this album.
You just had the strings.
Right.
And what, you lay them all down, you put them all together at the end of it?
We'd get the backing track first.
Yeah.
And then the orchestra record to the track. And then we do a string section, then brass. And then build it up and up, layer it. And then we mix it all together.
Can we hear that, Don?
Certainly. Let's play American Trilogy.
This is what I've been waiting for. 40 years after his death, thanks to the latest digital wizardry and the original recordings of his voice, Elvis is in the building. Elvis is an icon, someone whose image and story sums up an era, America from bust to boom. American Trilogy comes from the 70s, his jumpsuited Las Vegas period. In the 60s, we thought we'd lost him to Hollywood. And then H's miracle happened. We've come to the American South, a place that I think's key to understanding Elvis. This is where he transformed country music. He made a fortune and became squire of the second most famous house in America. He was a husband and father and the most photographed squaddy in the US Army. His posting to Germany was the only time Elvis left America, and where he started the relationship that I think made him the happiest he'd ever be. Had Elvis not been in Germany, he'd have missed the best thing ever to happen to him, meeting the stepdaughter of a US Air Force officer who'd become the Queen of Graceland. Two weeks after meeting my rival in love, she invited me to see Graceland. Elvis originally bought this house to please his mother.
Welcome to Graceland.
Tragically, Gladys and her daughter-in-law Priscilla never met. The rooms inside the house must be filled with clues about Elvis. The TV room, the living room, Elvis's jungle-themed den are virtually untouched. His mother's bedroom is still as it was. It's open to the public, but tonight, Priscilla and I will be alone with her memories. Does it still have memories for you here?
Oh, yes.
Does it?
It's like, once I'm here, I don't feel like I left. It's the craziest feeling. I honestly come into the home and I feel like I could just start life. I know what I need to do, you know.
Yeah.
I knew how much time I had before he was ready to come downstairs. I knew what cooking, having the food cooked, everything ready for him when he came down, what he liked to eat. It's deja vu and very surreal. Can you imagine? When I walked to the door, this whole room was filled with people who worked with him, his cousins, his aunts, his uncles, his jewelry maker and his wife.
You must have been dazzled.
I was overwhelmed.
Is this all how it was?
This is how it was. This is all original. Let's walk back in the piano room because this is a special room right here.
Did Elvis play the piano?
He did. When he just wanted to, have a little peace and quiet, 2 o'clock in the morning, he would come here, sit down, and sit over here, and he'd start playing gospel music. And he would just be in his own world.
That's the picture. That's the little girl we all knew.
Oh.
When we saw.
Now I'm a little girl with a little girl there.
The little darling.
I know.
Look at
Yeah, that was.
How old were you there?
I was 22 there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at the eyelashes. My gosh. Wow, those were great days. And this is our dining room.
Yeah.
Elvis would sit over here at the head of the table. There were about 10 of us to 12 of us here. and we'd have our dinner, and every night we'd watch television, and then off to the movies we went.
And off to the movies?
We played mostly during the night. You know, he had insomnia, and he didn't really get up until like maybe 4 in the afternoon. That's what's breakfast.
Really? He had insomnia?
Yeah, he had insomnia.
Why was that,
He had insomnia, I think, since he was a kid.
Really?
Child, yeah. And then play at night, sometimes motorcycle riding. He was a kid at heart. Wonderful spirit of play. Shall we go in the kitchen?
Lovely.
Well, this is our
it's...
kitchen. And then Elvis would come down these stairs. In fact, it's eerie being here because I can hear like the footsteps. His spirit is here. At times I can hear laughing. You know, I go, wow, what's that? You know, and I hear it, and it's the echo, you know, of maybe coming down the stairs that way or in the piano room. But this is the man cave.
Perhaps this is where I'll find the real Elvis. A man and a child.
He did this, I believe, in '76. There was a furniture store, and it had the ugliest furniture I've ever seen in that window. So Elvis wanted to know where it was, and he told him. He went down there, saw it, and took it all out of the window, bought it that day, and had it all delivered. And that was how Elvis did things.
When you put your arms around me, I get a fever that's so hard.
Yeah, this was the hangout right here. He'd sit there and put his feet on the table with his cigar and his water.
Did he smoke cigars?
He did, yes.
Fever in the morning.
So here we are now down in the basement, and this is the other man cave. Is this not great? A little bit of pop culture here. 3 televisions on the wall.
Little lovely bar here?
Yes, you made milkshakes. No alcohol. He didn't want alcohol.
He didn't drink?
Not really. He would do it occasionally, but not in the house. He wouldn't have.
Never know how much I love you.
Priscilla saw the man we teenagers didn't. The insomniac who preferred milk to beer. The joker. The big kid with 2 playrooms. Elvis had just turned 22 and was the biggest sensation in music when he bought this house. He'd arrived. But his story began in Mississippi, back then hot, poor, and racially segregated. How did all that affect the boy who would be king?
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you...
As a 10-year-old, I loved Elvis Presley. I never thought about where he came from, but he was probably somewhere exciting. Bright lights, big city. I'd never heard of Tupelo, and Mississippi was just a spelling test. I can see now that this little town helped make Elvis what he was, and, I suspect, what he would be. Tupelo was a name on railway timetables, all clanking wheels and lonesome whistles day and night. It still is, but now it's on tourist maps as well, thanks to its most famous son. Elvis was born on the wrong side of the tracks in extreme poverty in 1935. Today, his birthplace is in a special park, and to millions of visitors, a shrine. The house he was born in is basic. Filming isn't allowed inside, for there's not much to see anyway. Dirt poor was a term coined in America in the 1930s, and it meant people who were so poor that they had a roof over their heads, but the ground they were on was just earth, it was just dirt. Now this little shack that Vernon, Elvis's dad, built when he was just a teenager, in fact had planks on the ground, but there was pretty much nothing inside it, just a few sticks of furniture. They were dirt poor. It's extraordinary to think that this little humble place is where Elvis was born. Imagine it, Gladys, his mother, going into labor, not knowing she was going to have twins, and then giving birth to one, and then another. And one of the boys was stillborn. They called him Jesse. The other was Elvis Presley. Elvis's story was the American dream come true. It's important to the legend that the Presleys were God-fearing. This little church was central to Elvis's childhood. It used to be down the hill, but it was moved here beside the shack for the convenience of visitors. Or maybe that should be pilgrims. America's a deeply religious country, but here in the Bible Belt, Christianity meant more than something just to do on Sundays. The church was the center of the community. And what's more, after every service here, you got a free meal, which to poor people was a great deal. But to Elvis, the church meant more than just, free food and faith. Later on, he was criticized for corrupting the young with his unbelievable sort of action when he was singing and his fabulous way, his sexy voice and so on. But actually, what he heard here in this little church gave him the foundation of a strong moral code.
There will be peace.
He also got to hear his first religious music. Legend has toddler Elvis transfixed by the choir, mouthing words he didn't yet understand. We can only imagine how he'd have experienced the power of the gospel music coming out of churches in the ghetto across town. Elvis lived in East Tupelo. The popular music here was country, the citizens mostly white. It was poor, but community life was rich. Guy Thomas Harris is Elvis's oldest surviving friend. When did you first meet him?
Where you and I are sitting in my mother's lap in a rocking chair when I was about this long, June of '38. She was holding me there and he wanted to hold me. So yeah, he did right here on this porch.
Just sitting there with you, a little baby?
Yeah, Gladys and him came down every afternoon, and as I grew, I just started trailing on behind him, and we just real close.
You became real friends?
Yeah. We'd sit around and talk, and we'd sit around an old radio and listen to classic country music, like Hank Williams's and things like that.
Yeah. Do you remember Gladys, what she was like?
Oh yeah, she was in charge. If we got out of line, she whipped him, she whipped me. That was just them teaching us right from wrong.
Do you think Gladys became such a tough, strong woman because she had to?
Yeah, she was very protective. She was even more protective after Vernon went to the state penitentiary.
Elvis was 3 when his dad went to prison for 9 months for stealing a check. Gladys became the most important influence on the boy, and that would never change. In January 1946, it was Gladys who walked Elvis into town for a treat. Some say it was his birthday, or more likely, that he was miserable after his go-kart had been run over by a neighbor. Gladys took Elvis by the hand, brought him down here to this hardware store to buy him something in exchange. And what happened here in this shop changed the course of history. The Tupelo hardware store was the sort of place a pioneer could get anything, and it still is. I love this. Look, this says sales counter, where Gladys bought her son his first guitar. George, am I standing about where Elvis stood when he was 11?
Yeah, you're saying exactly where Elvis stood.
Yeah.
Elvis came in and he brought his mom in with him. He wanted a .22 caliber rifle. And of course, being the protective mother that she was, she said, no, Elvis, we're not buying the rifle. Instead of the gun, the gentleman that was waiting on them, Mr. Bobo, had something else in mind. He brought them over here to this counter, and he pulled out a guitar instead. And he just put a box or a crate or something for Elvis to sit on back behind the counter, and Elvis strummed on the guitar for a little while and realized that it was going to be the guitar and nothing else. So yeah, he took the guitar that day, and that was just 10 years later, he's standing at RCA Studio.
The child-sized hardware shop guitar saw him through his formative years. Elvis's first song was about a boy and his dog, and he played it endlessly on his new guitar. Old Shep would be a hit single in 1956. I loved it. For 10 years earlier, it drove the East Tupelo community round the bend. He sang it on stage at East Tupelo School and was praised for his voice. But how was he at other subjects? Roy Turner also came to this school and has researched the family history.
Vernon and Gladys neither could write.
They couldn't write?
No, they did not have much school. Elvis was a reader, but it was comic books. He loved comic books. But when you see his report cards, he's an average student. Music, that's a different story. Elvis got it natural. Gladys had rhythm. When Gladys was a young girl, and the barn dances that they had frequently, everybody said she was an ace buck dancer.
What's a buck dancer?
It's a lot of foot shuffling, and you do this rhythm on your thigh with your hand.
Yeah. So you think it came from her, this performance?
Yes.
He got rhythm, and he also got heritage. Vernon had Scottish and Irish roots, and Gladys had Cherokee.
I really don't think Vernon, Gladys, Elvis saw color the way a lot of people did. I really don't.
No.
I think they just saw people in basically the same circumstances, and very often the black families were in better circumstances than they were.
Hey, baby, I ain't asking what...
Elvis's classmates were white. Down south, the races were kept apart by law. But when he was 11, Elvis broke the color bar and the rules.
Don't be a stingy little mama.
So, Sam, this was the entrance for the colored folk, is that right?
That's right. And then once you get past her, nobody else sees you anymore.
Yeah.
And we slip right on in. You don't have to duck anymore because nobody can see you.
Yeah.
So we go right in here.
Yeah. Sam Bell and Elvis loved to come here to watch films. The law tried to keep them apart, but even then, Elvis was a rebel.
This was the black side here.
Yeah.
It was a petition, and about waist high, you could climb over it.
So you'd be here, and EP would be over there?
He would come in over there. He wouldn't sit over there. He'd go in downstairs, and he'd come on in there and come on across, and he'd cross over the banister right here. We thought we were really getting away with something.
Sam and Elvis had met in 1947, when the impoverished Presleys moved from East Tupelo to a mainly black district where they were poorest of all. Do you remember meeting him for the first time?
We was about 11 and 12, something like that. We was down playing, and we decided, let's go ask him to come play with us. And he said, but I gotta ask my mama. And she said no. And he stood there, and he was kind of downtrodden a little bit.
Yeah.
And she watched us a while. And then she said yes. He spread that fence like a rabbit.
In the storm.
Sam and Elvis were next-door neighbors up here on what was called The Hill. The wooden homes of the two families are long gone, but they were somewhere on this junction. Most white folks stayed away, but for little Elvis, this cool and leafy suburb was a paradise. Gladys's boy fitted in because he was poor and powerless and polite.
He wasn't treated as a white boy in the neighborhood. He was treated as one of the kids in the neighborhood. He was very polite to my grandparents, you know.
Yeah.
We better say yes, ma'am, yes, sir. But him being white, he didn't have to, but he did it anyway. Grandma, oh, she loved him. And my papa, he did too, because no white kid or anybody ever said yes, sir, that was white.
Elvis's charm was his passport. It got him access to music not heard down in East Tupelo. Did he like gospel music as well?
Yeah, there was a church, and every year they have a revival. He'd go in and go up on the stage there with them, and they'd be jumping around, he'd be jumping, he'd be beating the tambourine, you know, and all that. He stayed up there so long, one of the guys said, go get that food. He would love it.
I like to think of little Elvis enraptured by gospel, which is surely deep in the DNA of rock and roll. And there was another kind of music available locally.
Once a day, we'd go to the store, and the guy used to sit out there and play guitars. He would get up there with them. They wouldn't push him away. They'd teach him as long as he sit there. He liked that blues, the blues, the blues.
Down dirty.
Mm-hmm, yeah, low down blues, you know.
My baby's long and tall, shaped like a cannonball.
The music was in him, and it had to come out. What Elvis heard on the hill would go into hits like this, electrifying children like me who'd never heard the blues before.
Change my mind. She said, I'm so
In 1947, the Presleys moved up the Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee. Vernon and Gladys were looking for work, but Elvis found inspiration in this, the capital city of the blues.
Yes, the moon is rising.
He soon found the tracks and made a beeline for the wrong side of them. Beale Street was the beating heart of the musical city, where white citizens went after dark looking for fun or trouble or both. It was only a couple of 100 yards of hot tarmac, but it was shaking with fabulous music. Elvis couldn't stay away, which makes me love him all the more. At 13, he was spotty and penniless. How would this city make him a star in just 7 years?
Well, since my baby left me.
In January 1956, Heartbreak Hotel was Elvis's first million-selling single. His astonishing rise began just 3 years earlier in a dingy backstreet in Memphis. In 1953, Elvis was working as a delivery driver. He'd often driven past a recording studio on Union Street.
You still can find some room.
One hot August afternoon, he stopped. At the Memphis recording service, anyone could drop in and record themselves singing. It was just a bit of fun, a present for his beloved mum. August 1953, it's very hot outside. Elvis comes in. Marion Keisker is sitting behind the desk. Elvis says, "Can I record a record?" She says, "It'll be $4. He puts the money down. She says, "Young man, which famous singer do you sound like?" And he said, "I don't sound like anyone else." Okay. Just as he leaves, she jots that down on a note in her book. And Elvis goes through here. Well, the acetate record that Elvis cuts is My Happiness on one side, and That's How the Heartache Begins on the other side. He gets absolutely hooked. He loves doing this. Whenever he can, he comes week after week to record stuff, month after month. Sam Phillips, who owns the recording company, knows that he's got something, but he just can't quite make it right. So he pairs him up with Scotty Moore, fabulous young guitarist, Bill Black, who plays the double bass, and together they go through songs and try out arrangements, trying to get the sound that Sam Phillips knows is there somewhere, but he just can't find it. And one weekend, it's boiling hot, and they're here. They've all got day jobs, and it's the weekend. They're tired out. They're climbing up the wall. Elvis is slumped on the floor here. Bill gets up and just comes across here with his double bass, and he's going, singing falsetto, and they're all roaring with laughter. Sam Phillips in there has turned it off. Elvis gets up. Sam turns on the recording machine again. Elvis comes over here to the microphone, and suddenly the atmosphere completely changes. Something happens, and that something is huge. People say that that day, right here in this room, on July the 5th, 1954, they'd recorded the first ever rock and roll record.
Sam always had said, if I can find a white guy that has the feeling of a black guy, that doesn't sound like one, but has the feeling, I can make $1 million.
George Klein had been at school with Elvis, but was now working at a radio station that played black and white music. Sam Phillips thought Elvis might appeal to both audiences.
So he recorded it, and the next night he took it up to Dewey Phillips, the disc jockey. And so he played it, and the phones went off, lit up like a Christmas tree, and he played it 7 times that night. He held his hand over the label where I couldn't see who it was. He said, "Who is that?" I said, "I don't know who it is, Dewey." He said, "Well, you should know. You went to high school with him."
More singles quickly followed. Baby Let's Play House was about teenage dreams of togetherness. In 1955, My Elvis was a dreamer, and the subject was the gorgeous Miss Dixie Locke. Now, this is a quest to find Elvis, the beautiful boy before fame and adulation got to him. And Dixie is a vital witness because she knew him better than anyone. In his first recordings, all the songs he sang were actually sung to her, weren't they?
Yes.
Oh, Dixie.
I like to think so, yes.
Tell me how you met. Where were you? Was it at school?
No, actually at church. I was 15.
And you noticed him?
Oh, definitely.
What did he look like then? What did he look like?
Well, of course, he was just the most handsome man you'd ever see. My girlfriends had thought that maybe I was a little strange because I was dating him when he was a little strange. That's what people thought. But by the time of the prom, he was then, of course, Elvis Presley. So everybody was just thrilled to have him at the prom there.
For you to walk in with Elvis Presley?
Yeah.
I've got to ask this, Dixie, because I'm sure, without being prying and ghastly, did he ever kiss you?
Oh, yes. Yes, he did.
Did he?
And quite well, I might add.
Oh, fantastic. I suppose eventually his fame began to pull him away from you.
Well, it did. His life changed so quickly. I wanted him to have a regular job, 9 to 5, and come home every day at 5 o'clock, which, you know, that never happened again. He was in another world.
Blue moon.
Dixie saw less and less of her Prince Charming. Hundreds of girls were now hooked on his music and his style. My first Elvis dressed like a rebel, but over the years the outfits famously became more sophisticated, flamboyant. Apparently he was a clothes horse long before he had the spotlight. At school, George Klein had seen him suffer for his art.
Humes High School was a school over in North Memphis, which was not the most elaborate part of the city. But the kids there that make smart remarks about Elvis because the way he dressed, he would wear a bare black pants with a white stripe down the side, or he may wear a sport coat and turn the collar up, just to look different. He got that from Jimmy Dean, the Rebel Without a Cause. A lot of guys would give him a hard time because of his hair. His hair was longer than the Beatles' hair when they first started. And he had those sideburns, so he looked different.
Elvis's look was sort of street, sort of Hollywood. His inspiration was sort of Jewish and plumb spang in the middle of Beale Street. At the heart of the action was a clothes shop owned by the Lansky family. In 1952, the owner, Bernard Lansky, saw a spotty boy with his nose pressed up against the glass. He didn't look rich, but he did look promising. Today, the shop is located in the lobby of the grandest hotel in town. In 1955, Elvis would come into this cool lobby to sign his first big record deal, naturally wearing his lucky Lansky underpants. Hal Lansky was a kid then. Now he's the owner. Hal?
Hey.
Are you Hal Lansky? Are you Hal Lansky?
I am. How you doing? Welcome to Memphis.
Oh, it's
home
fantastic.
of the blues, home of rock and roll, home of Lansky's.
Tell me, Hal, how
Yes.
did he first come to this store? How did he come and...
Well, our original store was on Beale Street. My dad invited this young man in, and the young man said, Mr. Lansky, I don't have any money, but one of these days I want to come in and buy you out. And my dad said, don't buy me out, just buy from me. And that's what started the relationship. My dad took care of Elvis in the early 50s when he was still in high school.
But he created a look from your father.
Right.
It sort of sent shockwaves around the world, the way to look cool.
Right. The Lansky look is the 50s when Elvis looked his best. Everybody wants to come to Lansky's. They want to shop where the king shopped. They want to look like the king.
I want you to show me everything. Show me what this is.
Okay.
I saw one down here. Can I show you this, Hal? This one I loved so much.
Okay, yeah.
Ooh, ooh.
That's a shirt Elvis wore in the movie King Creole.
That was his shirt?
Yeah. Elvis Presley blue suede shoes. Yeah. This is the coat. Elvis got married to Priscilla. And
gosh.
You can get married in this coat or buried in it.
Collar up.
Abbey Road. You ever been there?
I have.
These are Elvis's favorite pair of socks. If Elvis was living today, he'd wear those.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good on you.
Did he buy shirts here?
He did. We named this shirt the Tupelo after Elvis's birthplace. A little higher collar. You love that.
Cutaway cuffs. Mm-hmm. Wonderful details.
We like to take credit for the capes, too. You want to touch the shoulder where Elvis touched? Right there. Elvis touched those shoulders. I'm going to tell you a quick story.
Oh, quick. Tell me. I mean, not quick, slow.
Speedway. What color is your Ferrari? Will this match your Ferrari? Needle and crown, yeah. Clothing of the king.
Is that your dad?
Yeah, it's my dad outfitting Elvis, and if you notice, he's flipping the collar.
Taking care of business.
Yeah. TCB. Taking care of Joanna. Try this coat on.
This is great.
Yeah, looks good.
I mean, sort of wrong sex, wrong hair, wrong everything. But
You look good in it. The mirror's looking at you, and the streets want you.
I'm going to buy truckloads of stuff.
All right, that sounds good. That winter chicken dinner sounds good.
I love everything about this shop. Every single thing.
Thank you, Joanna. Yeah.
I love you as well.
All right, well, okay.
It's okay, it started now.
All right.
In 1956, Elvis, the Southern star, went on TV and went national. They tried shooting him from the waist up, but his gyrating Lansky trousers sent teenagers everywhere out of control. The authorities were alarmed, but powerless. It was the breakout year. There was an avalanche of singles. 9 years after the penniless Presleys had fled Tupelo, Elvis returned in triumph for a homecoming concert. In the summer, he started working in Hollywood. Soon, you could see him everywhere. The fans around the world just couldn't get enough of this fantastic, fabulous, sensitive, soulful boy. I was only 10 at the time, so what grown-ups, i.e. Elvis, did with their money didn't really interest me. But now I know that he bought this beautiful little brick house in the shady suburbs of Memphis for his parents. There wasn't even a fence, bless him. There were fans on the lawn night and day. It was the end of the beginning. He was 21, exactly halfway through his life.
Well, get out of that bed, wash your face and hands.
In 1955, Elvis was a funny-looking white boy playing a funny sort of black music. By the end of 1956, he was a superstar. By the 60s, he'd earned the equivalent of $40 million a year. By the 70s, he was allegedly America's biggest taxpayer. The difference was his new manager. People are divided about Colonel Tom Parker, who wasn't a colonel at all, but he definitely had something that Elvis wanted. So far, I've got a picture of Elvis as a lovely, humble country boy with huge personality and charm, always took care of the people he liked. But his attachment to the colonel showed something else, a respect for his elders, for authority, maybe even a search for another father figure. Elvis's best friend, Jerry Schilling, saw the colonel at work. Jerry was one of Elvis's entourage, learning music management. Decades on, how does he judge Parker's contribution? Tell me, what were his skills?
He was the best promoter in rock and roll history.
Bell, come on, bring your cameras over here. Come on through here.
Colonel talked to the studios. He talked to the record companies. He talked to the attorney. I don't think he was a great creative person. Later on, when Elvis became more mature, wanted to do greater work, I think that was a problem.
Some fans say Tom Parker smelled the money, kept Elvis making movies he hated, and left no time for concerts or foreign tours. But did the Colonel not want to go overseas? Because we all missed it. We all used to yearn for him to come.
Well, he was illegally in this country, and he didn't want anybody to know that. And we didn't know till after Elvis died.
Oh.
But it really hurt Elvis's growth. This blew up in '74. Elvis was saying, I'm going to go overseas, whether you go or not. Colonel said, well, if you go, you'll go by yourself. The only time I ever saw them argue.
I like to live up to my reputation of being a nice guy. This is it, folks.
Vernon Presley was always at his son's side, but Tom Parker was clearly the power behind the throne. Did you think of him as a kind of father figure, maybe?
I saw a letter he wrote to the Colonel. He thanked him for everything he had done and said, I love you like a father. If I hadn't seen that in Elvis's handwriting, I wouldn't have believed it. I knew they had a special relationship.
Don't tell Aunt Mary about Uncle John.
I now think Elvis spent his life trying to find grown-ups who'd guide him. Just after he found fame and bought Graceland, he went into the army and off to Germany, where he found Priscilla. And at that key moment, he lost his beloved mother. Elvis loved his father, but I think he'd done it all for Gladys. She'd seen him rise, shack to mansion. Now she was gone, and he was alone.
I've never seen a grown man cry so much. He cried for 3 straight days. Elvis would get her gown or blouse or something, and he'd hold it. He'd just hold it all day long. I saw that with my own eyes.
She'd never met Gladys, but Priscilla picked up the pieces.
One of the things that Elvis told me when he was in the Army was that coming back to Graceland, he didn't know quite if he was able to do it because the last time he was here, it was with his mother. So that was a very big deal for him.
It struck him very hard, didn't it?
Yes, he really didn't trust anybody in talking and how he felt, but with her, he could ask her or tell her anything. If anyone was to keep him in line, it was her.
He talked to you a lot too, didn't he?
He did talk to me a lot, and I was so young at that time, only 14.
Was it because you were innocent? There was something non-scheming about you?
I think he felt very safe with me. He had a lot of fears. I was the listener. We became very close from that. And even when he came back to the States, he called. But he continued the calls and then invited me to come to Graceland.
My wish came true.
Priscilla was just a kid, but so was Elvis. He must have felt something of the unconditional love Gladys had given him. What was the wedding day like?
Nerve-wracking because we didn't want any press whatsoever to know about it. So I was nervous, you know, trying to find even a dress, but
somebody would find out.
Exactly, they would know. So I went in disguise. I wore a wig. I wore a wig. Everything was planned quietly. And then we had a reception here.
And did Elvis carry you over the threshold?
He carried me over the threshold where we had the reception, yes. So it was fun.
Exciting.
It was exciting.
Quite overwhelming, I would have thought, because it's sort of something huge. It was semi-public, actually, in a funny way, even though it was as private as can be.
Yes, it was hit all the papers, and not your normal wedding, that's for sure. I was very nervous, yeah. And he was nervous, too. He didn't know if this was going to ruin his career, that the girls would give up on him, because Colonel Parker told him, you know, once you have a steady girl, you know, that's going to be it, because every girl wants to be your girl. It was my big coming out.
After Priscilla, it was all sunshine. 1968 was the year of blessings. In February, Elvis had it all. The beautiful wife, the bouncing baby, the home, the fame and the fortune. Elvis stopped making B-movies and in his famous comeback show returned to what he did best, better. And then he went back to touring. It killed his marriage, and I think that killed him.
When you got on the road and you try to bring the families, in Elvis and Priscilla's case, a small child, it doesn't work. We had great wives, and we failed as husbands, myself and Elvis. After the divorce, after he got that freedom and on the road and all of that, I truly feel that he wanted his family back. You know, it could be pretty isolated at Graceland. He would go upstairs, and sometimes he would go up there for 3-4 days, we'd never see him.
Graceland was full of fun guys and party girls, but Elvis was lonely, depressed, and increasingly sick. He died just 4 years after the divorce. He was 42, felled by a heart attack, brought on by food and drug abuse.
James Brown flies in. I meet him, bring him up to the house. Elvis was in this casket, and James started talking to him. And he said, Elvis, he said, you know I loved you. He said, man, he said, you were the king of rock and roll. I was the king of rhythm and blues. We had it made, man. Why'd you leave me, man? Why'd you leave me?
In August 1977, thousands came to pay their respects to the king, just as they do today.
But as we drove down Elvis Presley Boulevard, I saw old people, young people, black people, white people, bikers, policemen, all reverent. And I said to myself, my friend has accomplished what he set out to do, to be loved by everybody.
Over here we have the meditation gardens. This is where Elvis is laid at rest.
How moving, how beautiful it is. He's buried with his family, beside the two people he spent all his life trying to please.
And this is Gladys's tombstone. She was a pretty amazing person, a big part of his life. And of course, his dad.
It's a funny thing, isn't it, Priscilla, because you're sharing your own husband with the world.
Well, he's given us so much, so much in his life, and he still gives us so much in his death. He was an amazing human being, truly. To him, this is what he accomplished. This is what he dreamed of. He bought it for his mother because, you know, this is what she never would have had if it hadn't been for his success, ever.
He sold 1 billion albums, but died with only about $5 million in the bank. He'd given it all away. Would I have loved him for the things I've learned here? Yes, for his generosity, his charm, his sense of family, his kindness.
And I think it's that kindness and the fact that despite his huge success, he was still a country boy from a little wooden shack that makes me love him most. To me, Elvis will always be the king.